Hello and welcome to the Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Zero, you are in a very rare predicament that most, casual, quote-unquote, casual movie lovers are in. Most people, when they realize that a film has been remade or anything, they either watch the newest one or what they consider to be the best one. But you're in a rare situation where you're watching... We not only watch the original version of a movie, but we also watch the remake the following week. And of course, we watched last week Infernal Affairs. This week we're watching The Departed. And while we are doing that, I will want to note right now, we will not be talking about Infernal Affairs in this review. We're going to have a separate podcast where we talk about the differences and the same, and the things that are alike between The Departed and Infernal Affairs. So if you're looking for that, you might want to listen to the next podcast that comes up after this. Otherwise, we are going to review Martin Scorsese's 2009 crime thriller, The Departed, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, and Mark Wahlberg. I am really curious as to what your opinion was of this movie, since I believe if I'm right on, it's a 2006 movie. I'm sorry. If I'm right on this one, you didn't see this before this week, correct?
Correct. I had not watched it. It was one of those that I had always had on my list of, I'm gonna watch it, I just gotta make time.
Right. Yeah, I know how that is. So yeah, why don't we get started with you? What did you think of Martin Scorsese's The Departed?
It was an interesting watch, but unfortunately, with respect to Infernal Affairs, it seemed very rushed as far as the storytelling went. But that's my personal short take on it.
Really? Despite it being about an hour longer than Infernal Affairs, it's you think it's rushed? Or are you comparing it to all three movies in comparison to the one movie?
With respect to just the entire Infernal Affairs trilogy, just the storytelling is super, super compressed, and in some ways it sort of suffers for it. And there's lots of stuff that I'll have to hold my tongue and wait for the comparison special episode. But yeah, just there's definitely some reasons on to why my opinion is that way, and I'll save that for when we record the comparison podcast.
Okay, so why don't we get started with certain aspects of the film? Of course, this is about a career criminal who is infiltrating the police force for basically a mafia don, even though it's not really a don, it's a mafia boss leader, because they're technically Irish and a don thing's an Italian thing. But anyway. And then there is a cop who is infiltrating the mafia side, and then they fight to figure out who each person is until the end of the movie, just like Infernal Affairs. How did you feel about the story and how it ran through? It is a longer movie, so did you feel like the speed of the film, did it go by at a good clip? Were you bored at points? Go on to that for me, please.
So at the beginning, where it sort of preludes to both of the focal characters, the spy and the snitch, their origin stories are a little bit rushed in the beginning, because it's just kind of like, okay, here's how both of them cut their teeth in starting their career, and then the middle point is where it is the most story rich and things really kind of develop, and then when it gets right to the end, it is just a downhill run, and it just goes by so quick.
Right, I agree with that. But I don't think it's rushed, really. You could say it lacks detail, in my opinion, at least. It lacks some kind of detail, because it really relies on, I guess, some kind of tropes in order for you to understand what each character is. Like, for example, Captain Sullivan, or Colin Sullivan, who's played by Matt Damon, he's a know-it-all arrogant prick, essentially. And there are a few scenes that show that point. And then you have Frank Costello, who is Jack Nicholson's character, who slightly gets more and more deranged and crazy as the movie goes on. It's DiCaprio's character that kind of doesn't grow, really. He's constantly, I would say, in a state of paranoia, which in that case, you would be. But in regards to character depth, it doesn't, there's not much there. God, it's really hard to talk about this movie without comparing it to Infernal Affairs, but okay. I think the characters in themselves are good for what they are. They're not the deepest. They're not like, I'm not gonna sit here and talk about how great Billy Costigan is in this movie, which is Leonardo DiCaprio's character. That doesn't really matter, but it's I would say the plot and it moving forward is the main crux of the film. It doesn't really care much about, I would say, the characters and their feelings so much as just the situation and how screwed up the situation is getting to a certain extent. Would be my opinion on that.
Yeah, Costigan's character, I definitely agree. Just the growth isn't quite as dynamic as getting the names mixed up as Sullivan.
Yeah.
So, which is a little disappointing, but that's it's just kind of the way it is. Because I really wish that there was a little bit more focus on Costigan, because I felt that Costigan's story could be one that could have been further developed a little bit. But yeah, just most of the character development really seems to be focused on Sullivan, which was sort of my observation when I was watching the movie.
It is funny you mentioned that, because you are right. They try and go more into depth about, I guess, Sullivan and his complications throughout the entire movie, try to make him strangely more sympathetic than Costigan, which is kind of weird, because it just, when you describe the characters, Costigan is really the more, I would say, the character that I think most people would feel more sympathetic to, not only because he's doing the quote-unquote right thing as being a snitch for the cops, but he's also had a tougher life. He has more of a moral center, but they don't really go into it too deeply in this movie. Whereas they go more into Sullivan, which is Matt Damon's character, and him tugging back and forth, being a cop to a rat, to back into a cop and to a rat again, and his mode of going through that. If they made Sullivan more interesting and more relatable and likable, I think that would have been a better move, but they didn't. While doing that, they always made Sullivan into really probably the worst person in the movie. And when you do that, you still want to have crumbs of that character to be likable and to be something you want to attach yourself to. But they really don't do that. But then again, even though that is true, it didn't bother me so much in this because of the trappings surrounding the film. Like I said, the plot and the way the device moves in the film is where I really got attached to the movie. I would say more of the direction, how the movie is shot. The music is excellent in this movie. And what Scorsese films do, especially in the mob movies, do so well is they do music fantastically in these movies. And The Departed is not an exception to this. I mean, even movies like Goodfellas and The Irishman that have great music as well, I think is vitally important in The Departed as well, especially in scenes where there's more action and more drama involved that really heighten the scenes in that.
Yeah, and as expected, just when I came into this, I was like, all right, it's a Scorsese movie. Music's going to be excellent. Definitely wasn't disappointed there.
Right. I've seen a lot of Scorsese films. I'm not entirely upset with the fact that this is the one he won the Oscar for, but this is definitely not his best movie. I think it's a great movie, and to say that and to say it's a great movie and say it's not Scorsese's best just shows how good of a director Scorsese is. But comparing it to, let's say, Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, if you want to stay on the organized crime racket, yeah, that's a part it isn't as good as those. But I think it's still a great film to watch. What did you think about the direction? Let's also go into cinematography too. The cinematography is okay in this. It's not, I would say, as showy, and it's not as showy and as elaborate as, let's say, like The Irishman. The Irishman had really good cinematography. So did Goodfellas. Goodfellas did as well. With that, like, it's fine, but yeah. What did you think about the direction of cinematography?
The cinematography, I'm with you. Just this one felt a little weaker to The Irishman, and it's a little disappointing too, especially just us considering the source material. But again, that will be something for that podcast. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, just even just comparing it to The Irishman, just it just seemed weaker, which is unfortunate. But
right.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
The direction, just definitely a lot more profanity in this one.
Oh yeah, it's a Scorsese film in the mob. Of course, it's going to be more profane and a lot more bloody too. Which I wish I warned you beforehand when you watched it. But when I watched it yesterday, I was actually a little more surprised with how bloody it was. So, yeah.
Yeah, thankfully, since it was a Scorsese film, I was kind of prepared for it. It's like, all right, it's a Scorsese film. It's going to be a little bloody.
Yeah. Right. I think the strongest thing about this movie is the performances. I'm going to start with, I think, the most overrated performance in this movie, and that's Mark Wahlberg. I'm going to say this. Did I like Mark Wahlberg in this movie? Yes. But his role is kind of a one-note nothing role. Basically, he curses Leonardo DiCaprio and everybody out in the funniest of ways, and that really is his character. But for his performance to be the only performance to get an Academy Award nomination, I don't know about that. That is, to me, that's a big slip up. I think in that aspect, and I think I know why that happened, but it's still, when you have, I think, much better performances in this movie, to honor and to show off that performance as the best performance in the film is, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree with that, because it was just like, okay, again, his shtick is just he demeans people with like some really, really goofy swears. Like, I get it, but surely there's more to him, right? Surely, and this is like, nope, no. Just that's a shtick. Okay, got it.
No, and there are people who were nominated. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor that year, and some will point out, hey, William Hurt got nominated for a movie he had 1 2-minute scene in, or Judi Dench won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in a movie she was only in there for about 5 minutes. True, and you know what? I will also say, those also didn't deserve to win or be nominated, because that's stupid. Why would you do that? That's entirely stupid. But man, like, especially with the other supporting performances in this movie, it just shocked me. Especially when I saw it, and then when they announced the nominations that year, I was like, really? Wahlberg got it? Like, okay, that's That's stupid, but okay. Whatever. But, okay. Let's get into, I think, okay. My favorite performance of the film is Jack Nicholson in this. And yes, I will admit it's Jack being Jack mostly, but that's why it's so damn good. Because he is clearly having a fucking blast playing this character. And it is rare for a director like Scorsese to say to an actor, yeah, you know what? You don't have to go strictly to the script. Just go wild. Just go crazy if you want, and we'll tell you when to tone it down. And that's exactly what this felt like. It felt like that he was given bullet points and say, okay, he was doing basically the professional wrestler promo version of acting. Here are the bullet points. Wing it after that, and just do something with it. And that's exactly what he did, and it is just a great performance. Like, I was surprised how much I liked Jack Nicholson's performance in this the second time. Because the first time, I was like, it's Jack being Jack. Okay, cool. But after watching this, I'm like, oh, this is a lot better than that. This is a really showy, really good performance.
As much as I hate to kind of take the lazy way out,
okay.
Jack Nicholson is definitely just one of the best performances in this movie because he is just so deranged and just he kind of plays it up just like a mobster that's just gone completely just off the rails and everything.
Yeah, and even though he is clearly having a ball with this, he does something that I think few actors who are given this levity are able to do. He's able to have a blast playing with it without cheapening the performance or making it to a certain extent where it's self-indulgent. I mean, yes, there are scenes in the film where he does crazy stuff that is unnecessary for the character, but you just know it's Jack just being Jack, and it still kind of fits in the role. I think we're not in spoilers, and I won't. But the example I'll give is the one conversation he had with Costigan at the restaurant, and he comes up to Costigan, and he's like, "Shh, don't," like he's talking to Ray Winstone's character. Like saying, "Shh, don't tell him." And he's about to sync up on him. That's a pure Jack thing. That couldn't have been the character, but it was just. It's a fun role. It's just a fun thing to watch. Although, if I recall correctly, I do understand. I guess I kind of do understand why he wasn't nominated, but he should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor in that role. I want to shift that off to Martin Sheen in this movie, one of my favorite actors of all time. I am a big Apocalypse Now fan. Badlands is one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite series of all time is The West Wing, so I'm a big Martin Sheen fan. He's good as Quinnen, but when compared to, let's say, the yang of Costello and Jack Nicholson, it's kind of sad that his performance gets pretty much outshone in this, because he's meant to be a straight shooter throughout, like not showy at all. But it is a good performance, but I don't think anyone gives him credit for it at all, because when in the performances that are in this movie, he is kind of like the third or fourth that you would think of.
And it's a bit of a shame because I think Martin Sheen's great, but Quinnen's character just doesn't have great character development either. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, he's Costigan's handler. That's all you need to know about him.
Yeah, pretty much. The main performances, of course, are Damon and DiCaprio. I mean, Damon was the most comfortable in his performance, mainly because A, he has a Boston accent already, so he's perfect for the role. B, he knows how to play that character to type. He's always that character, essentially. Well, not always, but he knows how to play that character very well. And yes, I think he was just very comfortable in that role, so he excelled in the role as Sullivan in this. Whereas I think DiCaprio's performance is good, but not great. I think he overacted a bunch when it came to the more paranoid scenes in the movie, where he's supposed to show how much all this is killing him and how it's really affecting him at a certain point. And that also is a problem with the story and relying on the device, relying on narcotics and medicine as, I guess, a gateway to excuse some of his behaviors later on, which I thought was kind of a problem. But it's a good performance, but it's not as good as I would say Damon's performance. I thought Damon's was a lot better, which is a shame, because you'd want to have the main character, which is Costigan, to be the better performance, and it's just not.
And it's a real pity too, especially with just sort of the whole. Let's just say he needs drugs to kind of control this whole fractured identity thing. It's just like there are better ways that this could have been done, especially since the psychological angle really wasn't explored very much. It was just kind of like, yeah, just go to the shrink. The shrink will help you check your head in, and then they barely go into the psychological angle, and he's just like, I'm frustrated. I want drugs. It's just like, damn it. This could have been so much more.
Right. They use the medicine and the drugs as a crutch. Jesus Christ. A crutch to emphasize his, I guess, his mental well-being and his mental state, than showing it on screen and getting more in depth on that aspect, which is a shame. I think that's a missed opportunity. God, what else is there to talk about here? A lot of the symbolism is on the nose in the movie. I think the final shot of the movie itself, we'll get into that as spoilers, is just like, okay, I get it. It's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. But, yeah, I mean, I get I get why it's a popular movie. It's just not that in-depth of a movie. When it comes to the psychological aspect of the character development, it relies a lot on you being interested in the plot. And the plot is good. I like the plot. I like how it's structured. I like how it runs. It's constantly engaging. But I wish more for these characters. Like, I thank God the performances are great. Because if they weren't, this wouldn't have been as good as a movie as it was. But yeah, I'm shitting on the movie a lot, I've noticed, but I still think it's a very good movie. I just don't. I guess I'm reacting more to people's opinions on it than my opinion mostly, but I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's a good movie. I think it's solid to a certain extent, but it could have been a lot better.
Yeah, and with me, just I think it's a fun movie. It's perfectly fine. Those who may never plan on watching Infernal Affairs, it's probably perfectly fine for them. It may be an excellent movie to them, but yeah, just when you see the source material, it may make you kind of question your opinion.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, I could see some people being swayed. Okay, you want to get into spoilers?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we are going to spoilers for The Departed. If you haven't seen the film, or you want to go back and see it in return, you can stop here and come back. Here we go. We are talking spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. The best character in the movie is Frank Costello. Are we in agreement on that, or do you think you have?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
Good. And the thing that this movie does excellently is basically showcase that this is the main guy. This is the most important guy in the movie. He revolves around everything. He is everything to he is the, I would call, in layman's terms, the MacGuffin of the movie, where everything that happens in the movie is because of him, and that is it. And to have as excellent of an actor as Jack Nicholson to play him, and not only make him somewhat likable, even though he's a complete asshole and a racist, but he's also to make him incredibly entertaining and to make him believable in the fact that let's say Matt Damon's character would follow him in this. It just shows how great of a performance that Nicholson had in this movie. Because there's nothing in the writing that really dictated, in my opinion, the way Costello is. Like, this is all Jack. This is all him acting his ass off the best he could to make this character the way he is. And nothing in the screenplay made me think that they did anything, I would say, okay, nothing in the screenplay that I thought that defined the character in any way that made him likable or sympathetic. I think this is purely a Jack performance that did that in this movie. And Costello is the best character in this movie, bar none. Like, because like the example that I will give is right smack dab in the beginning when he's talking about church and he's talking about the importance of the community and everything, and that I'm getting the quotes wrong, but he basically instills on these kids that he is the most important person in their life and to treat him as such, and you fucking believe it. Like, he owns that scene big time. So
Yeah.
Any scenes that stick out in your mind in the movie?
Trying to think.
I know it's hard without mentioning Infernal Affairs, but yeah.
One of the scenes that sticks out, and I won't be able to elaborate until the comparison podcast, but the scene where Costigan finally ends up sort of visiting Madeline just to kind of I guess reveal that things are not well, and gives her the envelope. It was kind of a oddly confrontational scene, because just she's kind of freaked out, like, yo, what the hell are you doing here? And he's just he's kind of got the, hey, I'm at my wit's end, just keep this envelope for me. You're the only person I can trust. Just open it if something bad happens to me. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for anything else. Just this is all I'm simply asking for. And it was just kind of a oddly confrontational scene, and that sort of stuck out for me. But the reason, there's a bigger reason that I'll elaborate in the comparison podcast.
Right. I found the romance between Costigan and Madeline, Vera Farmiga's character, who had a good performance. I want to point that out, that Vera Farmiga had a good performance in this movie. I think the romance between those two was pointless to a certain extent. I don't think it fit.
Yeah, I've got my complaints on that one, but that will
is that going to
that unfortunately leads into the comparison.
Okay. God, this is tougher than I realized. Okay. Not that the actors weren't believable in it to an extent, but it added a complication that wasn't necessary in the plot. Like, it's more interesting, especially in the end where Madeline finds out, and the way she finds out about Sullivan and his betrayal. And even then, that's the other thing. Even then, when she finds out, I don't buy the reaction very well. I do to a certain extent, but I thought it was a little bit of an overreaction to an extent. I mean, I didn't buy it, and it's not the performance. It's the way it was written and the way it was played out. Yeah, the ending, as cool as it was to an extent, I had a lot of issues with, including let's talk about the ending, which basically Costigan tries to convince Sullivan in probably one of the worst ways possible to get his identity back after Sullivan deletes it, which the way that scene was done I didn't like either, because you're led to believe that both characters have figured each other out in that scene in a very innocuous kind of way. It's the same as it is in Infernal Affairs. But Infernal Affairs does it more believably than The Departed did. Because if you watch the scene, the way that DiCaprio's character finds the envelope, in the way that the scene is structured, and the way that the set is done, is fairly ridiculous. That he just so happens to see that little bit of blue paper that just so happens to be the exact envelope that he just so happened to cross out with his... You get what I'm saying? Like, it's a lot of extenuating circumstances that made that scene unbelievable. And even more unbelievable that Sullivan then caught on real quick and then deleted his identity. Like, to me, it was just like, that didn't play so well with me.
Yeah. It was just a little bit way too on the nose as a reference to the source material. It was just like, okay, there could have been better ways to do this, but you just literally took the scene straight out of Infernal Affairs and just like, it's easy enough, just bleh.
Yeah. And then here's the other thing. Okay, let me add another overcomplication when we're also talking about overcomplicating the plot. Why did they need to put Costello as an FBI informant? I don't think it did anything to the film other than, that's messed up. There was no added, it explains one thing. It is basically how this guy never got caught. That's it. That's all it explained. And I remember watching it the first time going, that's messed up. Oh my God. But they did two things wrong in this. First, they didn't make it as important as it needed to be. And two, they showed it in the middle of the movie. Like, if that was the twist, like and guess what? Costello is working for the feds the entire time. Then I would be like, oh my God, what a twist. But because it's in the middle of the movie, you're now sitting with that in your head going, okay, what are they going to do with this? And they do nothing. Nothing with it.
And with regards to that, it just seems like he pulled a very, very thin reference from Infernal Affairs 2. And it was just like, hey, so here's the thing. And it was just like, this could have been done a little better, but whatever.
Okay. So that was the reference from Infernal Affairs 2? I mean...
Yeah.
Shit, okay. Well, we'll have more to talk about that later, including this podcast and the next. So, okay. We'll sit there. We'll sit on that. I mentioned symbolism at the end of the before spoiler review, and I'll get to it now. The final scene, good God, was that unnecessary? The final scene where Dingham, the Mark Wahlberg character, kills Damon in the final scene, and then a rat comes right out comes running through the window. I'm like, good God. I mean, can you be a little more on the nose with that? Like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, it was just like, we get it. This is a story about rats.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. And then that final scene is really the most useful scene, the most useful that Dingham has been in that movie. Like, it was literally, it really felt like the writer of the film, who, by the way, won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay that year. It's like he needed something for this character to do, and it just so happens he assassinates the crooked cop. How did he find out that he was crooked? That was the other thing. I was like, wait a minute. How did he figure this out? I was like,
yeah, it's one of those sorts of implied things. It's just like, so are we supposed to imply that whatever was in Costigan's envelope that he gave Madeline, that Madeline then went out to find Dingham, gave him the envelope and said, hey, this is what happened, and then basically he somehow just Dingham plots to basically just wait wait for Sullivan to just come home, and then the minute he comes home, boom, dead. This is like, that's a lot of info to digest and assume.
Right. And that is that is a stretch too. You would have to then believe in some certain aspects that A, Madeline went to the cops, B, got in touch with Dingham even though he was suspended for 2 weeks around that time of which this happened, C, that Dingham had that relationship with Queen, which is the reason probably that you can think of as to why he killed him, because he killed his boss, who you can infer they had a relationship, but not really Queen and Dingham, because it's not that deep of a relationship in the movie. So there's that. You have to do a lot of stretching to come to that conclusion. And I know some are going to say, but that is likely what happened. Okay, but I can poke holes in that argument constantly and say, well, how do we know this? And it just, that's the thing that definitely stuck out after watching this a second time, is just that ending was just like, why did you, like, I don't, okay. But that will be something we will definitely compare in the comparison of the two movies. Anything else you want to talk about on spoilers, or are we set?
I think we're set, because all the other stuff that I'm digging up, it's just like, wow, that hits a little close to the comparison podcast. Can't talk about that.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so let's get into our final thoughts. Zero, go right ahead.
As stated before, I think it's a perfectly fine movie. The action's okay. The cinematography is a little bit on the weak side, but still a good movie.
In comparison to Scorsese's other films, it's a good movie, even though I've kind of torn apart in this review. It's a good movie. I don't think it's great. I think for what it is, it's good. But I want to preface that I think specifically the performances of Jack Nicholson, well, essentially, this is Jack Nicholson's movie, I think, in this movie. As much as I did like Damon, Jack Nicholson is the movie in this, and whenever he's on, he is entertaining as hell in this. But in regards to, I think the best thing is Nicholson and the overall plot. It kind of turns into a don't think about it too hard movie and you'll enjoy, which is kind of sad to a certain extent, but okay. I mean, that's fine. It's definitely not Scorsese's best, but it's still a good movie. I enjoyed it, especially watching it a second time. But it is way overrated, as I think it's on IMDb. It's number 39 in the top 250. I don't agree with that rating at all. But yeah, it's a good movie. I enjoyed it. It's good. All right, Zero. So we are at the end of the podcast, and normally I'd have a question for you, but I don't. You know why? Laziness, possibly, but the reason why I don't have a question this week is because I want to highlight something that I'm starting to get you into, that I'm seriously into myself, and that is the Criterion Collection. If you are a film fan, you should know about the Criterion Collection. They release special edition of art house films, classic films, indie films, all sorts of different types of films with a lot of love and care into special features, artwork, and everything. And I want to go over the announcements this month. And I think we're going to make this a normal monthly thing on this podcast too. But I wanted to start with this month because this is a particularly good month. And I will go over it now, and you can comment as you want to, Zero. Let us begin. The first movie that was announced for November of this year is Vera Farmiga's Daisies, which is a Czech New Wave movie from, I believe it's 1966. It's a weird movie. I haven't seen it, but I've heard good things about it. I don't think you've heard anything about it, Zero. So do you have anything to comment on Daisies?
No.
Okay.
Haven't seen it, and it's a little outside my wheelhouse, but I assume I'll probably end up bumping into it at some point.
Yeah, possibly. Okay. Let's move on to something that's already in the Criterion Collection, but they're doing a re-release and a 4K edition that's In the Mood for Love, Wong Kar-wai's classic romance film. We better review this at one point, because if you're into Asian film and I love Wong Kar-wai, there's no reason why we shouldn't watch this. So, Zero, your thoughts on In the Mood for Love?
It is a classic movie. Just,
Yes.
it's kind of an interesting romance movie, but yeah, just one of the it was actually one of the first Wong Kar-wai movies that I was introduced to by my at the time girlfriend and everything.
Okay, nice. Okay. The next movie that was announced was The Power of the Dog. This was a Netflix exclusive, and it's coming to the Criterion Collection. This was nominated for a bunch of Academy Awards last year, including Best Director, which Jane Champion won for this year, Best Picture, Best Actor for Benedict Cumberbatch, Best Supporting Actress for Kirsten Dunst, Best Supporting Actor for Cody Smith-McPhee. It was a critically acclaimed movie last year. I watched it and liked it. I think it was a good film about masculinity and its beautiful, its beauty and its toxicity. So I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Any thoughts on The Power of the Dog?
When I saw that it was a Netflix exclusive going to a hard copy format, I was like, oh, neat. If Netflix were to some reason delist it, then at least anyone who has a physical copy will be able to watch it. That's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, and with HBO Max doing what they're doing now, something is telling me that's probably going to be something that's going to start happening, even if it's a Netflix exclusive, which we can get into, but forget it. Anyway, the next release, the next to last release that was announced, and not the biggest one, but the one I think I'm more excited by, Malcolm X, Spike Lee's biopic of the civil rights leader, starring Denzel Washington. Are you familiar with Spike Lee's work at all, or have you watched any of his films?
I'm familiar with his work. I don't really watch a lot of his work, but
Right.
definitely familiar with it.
He is a hit and miss director. When he hits, he fucking hits, and he hits hard. But when he misses, oh boy, are they not good at times. So, yeah. He also remade Old Boy. So, talk about a miss. But I really liked Malcolm X, and Denzel Washington's performance is great in this. So, and that's going to be in 4K. So I'm excited for that. But the reason why I'm doing this week specifically, and Zero, I'm going to want to let you announce what the final film is going to be in November. What is the Criterion Collection announcing for November?
So this one is huge to me.
Mm-hmm.
It is the Infernal Affairs trilogy. So Infernal Affairs 1, 2, and 3 in a entire set together.
Right.
And this one is huge because for the longest time I've been wanting to get a Blu-ray set of the entire trilogy, and the Hong Kong box set, it has been averaging a price of about $130, which, as much as I love movies and media, that's a lot of money to swallow, and
Right.
that's as long as the box doesn't get hit by customs or anything. Because if it gets hit by customs, then that's additional taxes and other crap you gotta frickin' account for.
Yeah.
So for this one, to be at the pre-order price of about $80, and the normal price after the pre-order period will be set to about $100. For $80, that's hard to beat, and I actually pre-ordered it immediately today since since I got paid today. So I was just like, "Yep, gotta have it. Cannot say no."
Definitely. I mean, this is a series of films that people have been asking for. I don't think they only released the first 3 on DVD. I think they never did a Blu-ray run, and this is one of those types of movies, especially when The Departed got big, where film buffs were like, we need to have better versions of the Infernal Affairs trilogy. And this is what basically Criterion does a lot. They take those types of films and they get the rights to them and releases them. And what they're doing with this is not only they're doing 4K transfers, but it's on Blu-ray, so which I was disappointed by, but that's fine. I can deal with that. They're also redoing the dubbing, or not the dubbing, the subtitles in this, which, if any of you decide to watch the version on Apple, which is the only place you can stream this and purchase it, you know how bad the subtitles are. Like, they go by in a clip at times. And then there are certain scenes that are just not subtitled. So you're stuck at times with what's going on. So that's good too. And then there's a bunch of interviews, there's deleted scenes. So maybe a lot of what we talked about in our review will pop up in those deleted scenes. So that's a fantastic release. And I was surprised by it because normally what Janus Films does, which is a subsidiary of Criterion, what they do is they gain the rights of movies, they then release them in theaters after they do the transfer, and then they do the Blu-ray 4K releases. They didn't do that this time. They gained the rights and then immediately started announcing that it's coming to Criterion. So I was shocked that it was that fast that they were releasing this. But I'm happy with it, and I am probably, since I liked Infernal Affairs, I'm probably gonna get the trilogy 2 at a sale. So I will definitely own it myself. I personally am more interested in Malcolm X and Power of the Dog, but I will definitely get the Infernal Affairs trilogy. So, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I love the cover art that they chose to use, which is the infamous standoff scene from Infernal Affairs 1, where you have just Chan Wing-yan holding the gun to Lau Kan-ming's head. I'm just like, God, that is an iconic scene. That is one hell of a cover for the trilogy.
It is, and it's a great scene. And part of me is like, I kind of wish they put more effort into it, but on the other hand, it's such an iconic scene that it makes sense. So, yeah, I'm also kind of disappointed in the 4K cover for In the Mood for Love, because I actually like the cover of the Blu-ray I have. So, yeah, and I'm kind of persnickety with that. I didn't get the Before Trilogy the Before Trilogy box set until it was really on deep sale, because I hated the artwork so fucking much, even though I love the movies. So I can be persnickety like that. But yeah, that's great. So those are coming out in November. What happens in the middle of every month, Criterion announces another month. The next month is going to be, of course, December of this year. So they'll announce their releases for that month next month around the 15th. So when that happens on an episode, we will cover that every episode. I think that's not a bad idea, I think, since I'm a big Criterion fan and I'm trying to get you into it. So there. Okay. So on that note, we are at the end of the podcast, but before we go, we have to discuss what we're watching next week. And since we've been watching some serious movies, some bloody movies, some, overly serious movies, we decided to go the comedy route again. And we're going to start with spoofs and parodies. Those are the movies that generally make fun of other movies. Examples are, let's say, Scary Movie, Not Another Teen Movie, the Naked Gun trilogy, those movies. But what we're going to choose for next week is an acclaimed film that did not do well in the box office, but gained a lot of notoriety to the point where it became a popular TV series now. And that's What We Do in the Shadows, the vampire film parody. Let me see.
I would say it's more like a mockumentary.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's definitely a mockumentary, but it's meant to be like a comedy parody of such a vampire movies as well. So, so this stars Taika Waititi, Jermaine Clement, Jonathan Blow, Rhys Darby, and that will be what we'll be discussing next week. So if you want to join us, you can. You can rent it on YouTube, Amazon. It's not streaming anywhere else, unfortunately, but you can definitely check it out there. So on that note, we are at the end of the podcast. Tune in next week to where we discuss What We Do in the Shadows. I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we will talk to you next week.